Hi, it's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, so that you can have real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. In last week's blog, I was showing you 6 phrases you should never say when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. You can read the blog here if you haven't read it. Click on the link. In this week's blog, I want to show you what you need to do in the first few hours after your loved one has been admitted to intensive care. There are very few occasions in life that leave you more frightened, more stressed, more vulnerable, and more overwhelmed after you have found out that one of your loved family members has been admitted to intensive care. On the stress scale, change in health of a family member has been rated with 44 out of 100 stress points, and it ranks amongst the top 10 of the most stressful life events. And if your loved one's health is in jeopardy in intensive care, and if you haven't been pre-warned that your loved one is facing a health crisis in intensive care, you're most likely out of your comfort zone. You feel challenged, frightened, stressed, and you feel like other people are running the show, and you feel excluded from the decision-making process. It's therefore absolutely critical and crucial that you know what you need to do after you have found out that your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. First of all, you need to know that you're not alone, and you need to know that most families of critically ill patients in intensive care feel out of control, out of their comfort zone, stressed and vulnerable after their loved one has been admitted to intensive care for critical illness. The difference, though, between the families that get through the experience and the challenge of having a loved one critically ill in intensive care fine, and the difference between the families who struggle through the experience, is that the families who get through the experience fine and come out even stronger at the other end are the ones who seek help, and they are the ones who generally realize that support for families in intensive care is limited for a number of reasons. They therefore seek out external resources such as IntensiveCareHotline.com, and by seeking out help and resources, you will also be able to have control, power and influence, and you're not at the mercy of the intensive care team. Your first task after your loved one has been admitted to intensive care is to find out how critical and severe the admission of your loved one is. Therefore, your immediate steps are that you need to determine if your loved one has been admitted to intensive care for a short-term routine stay with a discharge to the ward imminent in the next 24 to 48 hours, or a long-term stay above 48 to 72 hours, or a critical illness that requires mechanical ventilation and an induced coma, as both mechanical ventilation and an induced coma make your loved one's stay in intensive care more unpredictable and also make it more risky for complications to occur. A critical illness that leaves your loved one vulnerable to the point that your loved one's future quality of life may be threatened and is uncertain. This could be anything from brain and head injuries to multi-traumas or heart diseases such as heart attack, cardiac arrest, heart failure, cardiomyopathy. A critical illness that is potentially life-threatening, where the intensive care team may have hinted towards non-survival of your critically ill loved one. Or your loved one may have a critical illness where the intensive care team thinks it would be difficult, burdensome and resource intensive to get your critically ill loved one through their ordeal. Or your loved one may have a condition where the intensive care team suggests withdrawal or limitation of treatment, because again, they may not have the patience, the resources, or they may have a negative and limited mindset. Now, with all these conditions, take a look at the written part of this blog, and there are links to what you need to do next. These are the most important things that you need to focus on in the first few hours after your loved one has been admitted to intensive care. And it's critically important that you form your own opinion and that you make up your own mind, irrespective of what the intensive care team is telling you and your family. It's also important that you get to that all-important feeling of control, power and influence during the stay of your loved one in intensive care. How can you achieve the all-important feeling of control, power and influence whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? You'll get to that all-important feeling of power, control and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to get real power and real control and how you can influence decision making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Our free reports help you with in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is dying in intensive care. Sign up for your free membership now and download your free Instant Impact Report by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you'll also learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free report, you'll also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions, how to eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle and vulnerability even if your loved one is dying. 5 killer tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to control, power and influence in your situation. You will get crucial behind the scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. How you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. With your free Instant Impact Report, you'll also get 4 other free reports, and the reports you will be receiving are the 6 questions you need to ask the most senior doctor in intensive care, 10 things you didn't know doctors and nurses are talking about while you're not at the bedside with your loved one, the 7 answers to the 7 most frequently asked questions if your loved one is critically ill in intensive care, 9 myths of being a critically ill patient in intensive care. Thank you for tuning into this week's blog, and I'll see you again in another update next week. Make sure you also check out our Your Questions Answered section or send me an email to support@Intensive Care Hotline with your questions. This is Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, and I'll see you again next week with another update.